of thought.
Well, and certainly I think you played a very big role in this synthesis of kind of cognitive science with Darwinian theory. And in fact, certainly it informs, you see it both in the language instinct, but also certainly in your magnum opus, to date at least, How the Mind Works. Did you, by the way, ever consider giving this an ambitious title? Or you finally opted for the low-profile marketing approach.
Low-profile. Well, you know, I think simple words are best, and short words, monosyllables.
They are small words, very unpretentious words, yes in this title. That's good. But anyway, this is very much infused with a cognitive perspective and a computational perspective, which is something you brought to bear. And you drew heavily on the successes and failures of artificial intelligence. And in fact, one of the key insights that you draw on is the fact that it's actually extremely hard to get computers to behave intelligently, to do intelligent things. How is it that that informs your view of the human mind?
If you try to program a device to do what we take for granted, you know, pick up a glass without crushing it or dropping it, or walking across the street without trying to step over what you know is a shadow, it's a remarkably difficult engineering problem, but it's something that any 4-year-old can do. And that immediately gives you an appreciation of how much complexity there has to be in the brain. And if there's that much complexity, it immediately raises the question of where did it come from? And in the rest of the organism, we attribute complex adaptive design to the operation of natural selection, and it naturally raises the question of what evolution's role has been in the rest of the mind. Language also. The reason that you can't talk to your computer, or if you do, the best you can do is talk one word at a time like that, is that just the process of recovering words from continuous speech is something that engineers haven't been able to solve, let alone meanings that you could actually tell your computer to make some plane reservations in a few words and it would go off and do it and come back to you.
Right.
That's not something that a computer can achieve, but any human being can.
Right.
All of these things, just allocating time during the day so that you don't die of thirst, but that you don't sit locked in the kitchen, figuring out how to prioritize physical safety, finding a mate, satisfying physiological needs, learning about the world, something that all of us do, is another thing that we haven't been able to program a robot to do.
Right. So one thing this suggests is that intelligence as a generic property didn't just kind of show up all of a sudden and we were intelligent in some general way that allowed us to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it suggests that just, say, the brain being inflated in evolution probably wasn't enough, that there isn't this generic stuff called smarts or intelligence, but there's an awful lot of engineering in there.
Okay. Now, I want to tick off a few of the key theories in evolutionary psychology, some of which you've already alluded to, in fact, and just get you to say just a few sentences on why you think they're, what strikes you as important about them. One is kin selection.
Yeah, kin selection, I think, is really the key to understanding our social relationships. Why everywhere people care more about their blood relatives than about strangers. Why we care so much about our children. Why blood is thicker than water. Why the airports are clogged around Christmas time with people wanting to put their bodies in the same room as their blood relatives. And then over the course of history, when you look over European history, and it's strategic marriages and dynasties and wars and civil wars over succession to the throne, all based on blood relationships. Something that's even more obvious in traditional societies, in tribal societies, where kinship is almost everything.
And it's an idea that is surprisingly subtle. I mean, people take for granted the fact that you like your kin. Well, at least sometimes you like your kin. Anyway, you have stronger feelings about your kin than you do about the average person. And yet the Darwinian rationale is in a way straightforward and in a way extremely subtle. And there are people who kind of think they get it and really don't, in a way.
Well, I think the part that is most subtle, but perhaps most profound, are the implications that Robert Trivers drew out of the theory of kin selection, which is Yeah, I love my brother and sister because they share 50% of their genes with me, and my parents and my children and so on. But 50% isn't the same as 100%.
Right.
And since every person shares 100% of genes with themselves, but only 50% with a parent or sibling or child, you've got room for conflict of interest, that what I want for me and what I want for my sister isn't the same thing as what my sister wants for my sister and my sister wants for me, and so on. And that, I think, gives rise to all of the labyrinthine complexity of human
Right.
relationships, that we're not like ants, which are pretty boring when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
But you have family dynamics and family politics and family dramas, that the people who are most important to you in the world are not necessarily ones whose interests coincide with yours 100%, much more than for any stranger, but still not 100%.
Right. And speaking of Trivers, what about the theory of reciprocal altruism?
That is the other major theory of that explains why we have social interactions, why we care about people who aren't related to us, like friends, colleagues, and it may account for a large part of what made us smart, namely to keep track of what we owe other people, what they owe us, to make sure we're not exploited, to cultivate relationships that will have a relatively open reciprocity over a long period of time versus ones that are shorter term, where we remember who did what for whom, act by act. And it's probably the thing that differentiates humans the most from other animals, where benefiting someone who isn't your blood relative is pretty rare. And it may not be a coincidence that we're a species with these preposterously big heads, and we obsess over our reputation, over what we've done for other people, what they've done for us, and we form complex societies, unlike other organisms. These probably went together, and Trivers' theory provides a very deep reason why they do.
It seems to me that one thing evolutionary psychology can do is kind of put you in touch with your motivations. I mean, after all, the human mind wasn't designed, and I put designed in quotes when I'm talking about something natural selection produces, but the human mind wasn't designed to understand its own motivations. I mean, if you, for example, say you have a social rival and you're subjecting him to particularly harsh moral scrutiny and suggesting to people that he's immoral, the mind isn't designed to, A, realize that the reason people are inclined to do that is because it helped get their ancestors' genes into the next generation. B, the mind isn't designed necessarily to even understand that you are subjecting your rivals to harsher scrutiny than people you don't really care about or than your allies. And there are a number of, I mean, you know, for example, like laughing at jokes of high status or powerful people. You know, you may kind of be a little more generous in your assessment of how funny their jokes are without even realizing it. You may really think that the jokes are funny. Evolutionary psychology can bring you in touch with the fact that you're doing these things, and so can really be something that you carry around with you in the course of your everyday life, right? And I'm just wondering whether on balance you find it more of kind of a blessing or a burden.
Yeah, absolutely a blessing. I mean, I can't say that it's led me to live my life any more wisely, or it's really the old question of, does psychotherapy help? So if you had a brilliant, insightful therapist who really could tell you why you did what you did, would it actually help you? And the jury's, I think, out on that, and it might be out on evolutionary psychology as well. But I think it's got to help. You realize you're prone to self-deception. You realize that you have, your assessments of other people of the same sex and the opposite sex may not be in your own, the interests of your own long-term happiness, that you have insight into your marriage, how much this actually